All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, look, P. Diddy wants to go to Fort Dix. There's P. Diddy right there. Why would he want to go to Fort Dix? He was just sentenced with 50 months. What is he looking to get at Fort Dix? Let's also talk about an RDAP program. That's a residential drug treatment program that they have at Fort Dix, and how that all is going to affect his time. I'll even give you an estimate of when I think he's going to leave prison, the federal prison. So, guys, when the judge announced Sean Diddy Combs' sentence was just 50 months in federal prison on paper, that's 4 years and 2 months, it just does not seem like enough time in the federal system, in relationship to what he's done. With that said, it gets worse. In the federal system, the number you hear in court is rarely the number you actually serve. And this isn't just about one celebrity trying to game the system. This is how the federal system actually works for everyone. And most people don't know it. The sentence you hear at sentencing, that almost never is what the person gets. And programs like RDAP, they're the Bureau of Prison's biggest tool for early release. But they're also one of its best kept secrets. So again, P. Diddy, he probably knows that if he gets into Fort Dix, he can get into the RDAP program, and that can cut his time down. And we'll explain how that works. So I'll even give you an estimate of, if you count everything, including good time credit, and then if he finishes the program, I'll tell you how to finish it, when we could expect him to be out of federal prison. Now, Combs has already been behind bars since his arrest in September of 2024. That year of time gets credited, leaving him with roughly 37 months still to serve. So that's your year minus the 50 months. So about 37, 38 months. And now comes the math that matters. Federal inmates can earn good conduct credit, about 54 days off for each year served. That alone could shave several months off. But the real game changer is the residential drug abuse program known as RDAP. If he gets in, and if he completes it, Diddy could cut a full year from his time. Stack that with good conduct credit, and suddenly that 50-month sentence shrinks down to something closer to 2 years in custody. Guys, I've done a couple of shows on the RDAP program. I had someone on it on my show called RDAP Dan. You may find this show interesting. So just put in the search engine for YouTube, RDAP Dan Tier Talk, right here. It's interesting. It tells you how it works. So what exactly is RDAP, and why are his lawyers fighting to get him to Fort Dix, one of the Bureau's prison's main RDAP hubs? Let's talk about RDAP. RDAP is the Bureau's most intensive substance abuse treatment program. Think of it as a prison within a prison. Inmates who qualify are moved into a separate housing unit, a modified therapeutic community where daily life revolves around treatment. It's a demanding program. 500 hours of therapy and coursework spread over 9 to 12 months. Half the day is spent in group therapy, relapse prevention, and cognitive behavioral training. The other half is spent working prison jobs or attending education programs. It's not just classes, it's a cultural shift. Every interaction, meals, recreation, chores happens within the treatment unit, reinforcing accountability and peer support. The program moves in phases. First is orientation, then is core treatment, and finally transition, where the focus shifts to reentry and relapse prevention. The Bureau points to research showing RDAP participants are less likely to relapse or reoffend after release, and that the program's real goal, rehabilitation through accountability, is it's more about rehabilitation through accountability and not just for a shorter sentence. But yeah, okay. When people are looking to manipulate the system and they see the shorter sentence, they're going to go for that. But by the way, and we'll get to it, this is usually planned out before they even get to the sentencing. This is usually done prior, and I'll explain that. So, but even by the way, we talked about the shorter sentence, but even that isn't the end. To complete RDAP, inmates must also carry their treatment into the community phase, usually in a halfway house or under home confinement for at least 120 days. Only then does the program count as finished, and only then does the Bureau of Prisons consider granting that precious 12-month sentence reduction. And here's where it gets interesting. That final 120 days in a halfway house or home confinement, that's not just a formality. For someone with Combs resources, home confinement can mean living in a mansion with an ankle monitor while transitioning back to society. It's still custody, but it's a very different kind of custody, and it counts towards completing RDAP. Now, to get into RDAP, you can't just say you had a problem. The Bureau requires documentation, usually from pre-sentencing reports, that's the PSI, psychological evaluations, or treatment records within 12 months of arrest. Combs' legal team would have had billed that case early, possibly during plea negotiations or sentencing prep. So it's not automatic, and it's very strategic paperwork. So they would have to know during that PSI, during the pre-sentencing, that he had a drug problem. And I think that was made noted almost immediately upon this case opening. An inmate has to volunteer and, more importantly, has to prove a verifiable substance use disorder documented within a year before arrest. Not everyone qualifies, and even those who qualify may not be granted the early release. The Bureau has wide discretion. Still, the incentive is enormous. Finish RDAP and you can leave prison up to a year early. But here's the catch. Fail a drug test, catch a disciplinary ticket, or even refuse to participate, and you're out. And once you're removed, the early release disappears with it. Completion isn't guaranteed, and the risks are real. So why Fort Dix? Why does he want Fort Dix? This is why Combs' attorneys are lobbying hard for Fort Dix. Not every federal prison has RDAP, and Fort Dix is unusual. It has 2 full RDAP units, what I researched, making it one of the best places in the system to guarantee entry. It's located in Burlington County, New Jersey. Fort Dix is a low-security institution, the largest federal prison in the country, housing nearly 4,000 men. I think I saw 3,900, but nearly 4,000 men. The conditions are considered less restrictive, so they're dormitory-style housing, more open movement, and access to programs ranging from education to vocational training. It's also close to New York City, where Combs grew up, making family visitation far more practical than if he were sent to prison in the Deep South or Midwest. Fort Dix has a reputation. It's known in the system as one of the more livable federal facilities, less violent, more program-focused. For someone like Combs, who will have a target on his back simply because of who he is, that environment does matter. This isn't just about comfort, it's about safety. And his attorney, Terry, that name, Garigas, put it bluntly in her letter to the court. In order to address drug abuse issues and to maximize family visitation and rehabilitative efforts, we request that the court strongly recommend to the Bureau of Prisons that Mr. Combs be placed at FCI Fort Dix for RDAP purposes and any other available educational and occupational programs. So on the surface, it looks good. But again, in the long run, it's totally beneficial for the inmate. So on paper, the argument is simple. Fort Dix has the program, the proximity, and the opportunities that best suit Combs' rehabilitation. The numbers behind the beds, I looked into this a little bit, but the only detail I can get is from 2022. But when we talk about RDAP at Fort Dix, the numbers of available beds don't always line up. Now, guys, remember, everybody's going to want to get in this program. So what makes someone get forced to the top? So, I mean, even for a lawyer to say, we recommend he go directly to RDAP, there could be a waiting list. What makes him so special that he gets to jump in front of everyone else? I mean, usually the recommendation of a prison should not be allowed by a lawyer, because that should be up to the discretion of the people who deal with classification, prison management, ultimately the FBOP. Because the last thing you want is for a court order to say that he must be at this prison, because that becomes very limited as to what you do. And usually judges won't do that. That's operational. They'll leave that to the agency to decide. But anyway, I wanted to mention the beds because even though you have 2 RDAP programs here, from what I've researched, it's research a little bit dated, they may look like they have more beds than they actually are able to utilize. So, and guys, if you work at Fort Dix, let me know, because this data is not the most recent, but it gives people an idea. That's why I'm using it. So when we talk about RDAP at Fort Dix, the numbers don't always line up. On paper, some Bureau of Prisons document list more than 270 beds for the program. But in practice, and I saw in 2022 oversight report showed only about 98 beds were actually operating, with 90 of them at the time filled. That gap comes down to the difference between design capacity and reality. The big number, 272 beds, is a planning figure. It represents how many spaces the institution could theoretically dedicate to RDAP if every dorm and staff position were in place. The smaller number, 98 beds, reflects how many were truly active at that time, with staff assigned, housing units converted, and inmates enrolled. Because demand far outpaces availability, RDAP slots are carefully rationed. Inmates are prioritized based on factors like how close they are to release, their behavior record, and their security classification. For someone like Sean Combs, this is why Fort Dix could be important. It's one of the few places with multiple RDAP units, giving him a much better shot actually landing a spot and shaving the extra year off his sentence. In short, while Fort Dix may look like it has hundreds of RDAP beds on paper, the real usable space is much smaller, which means competition is fierce. The waiting list is real, and placement becomes a strategic advantage. Every bed given to a celebrity is a bed someone else doesn't get. And when demand is this high, strategy and resources can sometimes matter more than need. And I want to talk about that strategic layer. There's another layer here, one that people inside the system understand well. Programs like RDAP are limited. They're not available everywhere, and space is always at a premium, as I mentioned. High-profile inmates sometimes use this fact strategically. By attaching themselves to a specific program, they can guide their housing assignment towards a facility they prefer. It's not illegal. It's not even necessarily inappropriate. It's strategic. So I want to go to RDAP, and they may say, okay, well, good, but RDAP's only at these facilities. If you want Fort Dix, you don't ask for Fort Dix. You ask for RDAP, which is what the lawyer did. And Fort Dix just happens to be one of the best places to do it. For someone like Combs, wealthy, famous, and very much a target in prison, this isn't just about treatment. It's about survival, safety, and control over where he spends the next 2 to 3 years of his life. So how the game gets played is some inmates, especially high-profile or well-resourced ones, try to increase their odds of getting into RDAP through strategic moves that are legal, borderline, or sometimes fraudulent. The Bureau screens for authenticity and can deny benefits or impose discipline if someone is lying or gaming the system. But the tactics are common enough that they're worth understanding. Here's what it looks like on the ground. Defense attorneys frame the case around treatment needs in sentencing, memoranda, asking the judge to formally recommend a facility with RDAP, which we saw, a standard legitimate request that signals seriousness and can influence Bureau placement decisions. Lawyers work to front-load documentation, treatment records, therapist notes, medical charts, or affidavits showing substance use disorder within that critical 12-month window before arrest. And guys, by the way, that show I mentioned with RDAP Dan, we cover a lot of this. His knowledge is spot on because he did it. But he also helps people. He's a prison consultant person now. So he helps people that have been getting arrested. So he probably shows them how to do all this, how to get into the RDAP program. Verifiable evidence makes the claim stronger in speed screening. Timing matters too. RDAP applicants who can realistically complete both the unit-based program and the community phase before the release date gets prioritized. Being timed right helps. So does leveraging formal psychological evaluations or diagnostic testing. Objective clinicians report carries weight in bureau screens, and high-profile cases add another dimension. Visibility and advocacy. Legal teams and PR operations can pressure for particular placement, publicize treatment needs, or use political and legal influence to create administrative attention. Now, while the Bureau must follow its rules, practical realities and paperwork prioritization sometimes follow the heat. And then there's selective self-reporting, emphasizing documented drug use history while downplaying disqualifying conduct like recent violent convictions or firearm involvement. Some disqualifiers can block early release eligibility entirely. Minimizing those aspects in the file may keep someone in the running. But the Bureau has safeguards. They verify documentation against pre-arrest treatment notes, probation reports, arrest records, and medical files, not just a lawyer's claim. And psychology staff conduct clinical interviews looking for consistent histories and signs of malingering. Priority rules favor those who can finish the entire program, and if an inmate lies, refuses to participate, or catches disciplinary infraction while in RDAP, they get expelled and lose the early release benefit. And that's a real deterrent. Still, the system isn't airtight. RDAP is a scarce resource, and when beds are limited, time and documentation and legal muscle can, fairly or not, decide who gets the treatment and who sits on the waiting list. So what does that mean? Let's put this all together. This is how 50 months turns into 37 months, then into 31, and possibly into just 19. By the end, Diddy's actual time in a federal prison might be closer to a year and change, with the rest spent at home on an ankle monitor. So again, I want to talk about this 50-month sentence. I want to break it down. So bear with me here, guys. 50-month sentence. So again, he was sentenced to that in May of 2025, so 50 months. So you got to minus the 13 months he's already served. So that's September of 2024 to wait, where did I get the 13 months here? Hold on, guys. I had to do the math on this myself. Hello. September to October. Duh. So 50-month sentence. So I have something here starting at May of 2025, but either way, sorry guys, let me correct myself because this is where it gets a bit complicated. 50-month sentence minus 13 months already served. So again, you got September 2024 to, let's say, September, October of today. That's around 13 months. So that gives us 37 months left remaining. Then you got to minus the 6 months good conduct credit. So that is going to be what I said could be around 52 days a year. So that's a 15% reduction. That brings us to 31 months. And then you got to minus the 12 months if RDAP is completed. And that leaves you with 19 months left in custody. Final would be 4 to 6 months in a halfway house or home confinement. So the actual prison time is somewhere between 13 to 15 months. Possible release date could be the summer of 2026. That's why Fort Dix matters. It has the program that could give Combs back a year of his life. It has the location that keeps him closer to family, and it has a security level that reduces the risk of being a celebrity inmate. For the Bureau of Prisons, this is about rehabilitation and reducing recidivism. For Combs, it's about shaving time, staying safe, and keeping his family close. And for the public, it's a reminder that in federal prison, the sentence you hear in court is really the sentence that actually gets served, because programs, credits, and strategy can make all the difference. So here's the bigger question. So is this justice, or is this just how the system works when you know how to work it? RDAP was designed to reduce recidivism and give people a second chance. But when a billionaire uses it to cut his time in half, while someone without a legal dream team sits in the same prison doing the full stretch, what does that say about who gets rehabilitation and who just gets time? Whether you see this as a loophole or a lifeline depends on how you see the system. For some, it's proof that the Bureau can turn punishment into treatment. For others, it's proof that in federal prison, those with power and strategy always seem to find the softer landing. So we're going to see where he lands. But now I want to get guys get an understanding of why Fort Dix is important, why the RDAP program is important, so we see things beyond the surface level. Love your thoughts on this. Stay safe.